David was the writer. He was the creator of this thing.
The photography is about transporting the audience.
But he was also smart enough to let us do our jobs, knowing that we got what he wanted.
The last thing we wanted them to do was, even subconsciously, was have the audience say, oh, gee, that doesn't look right, or something's funny about the way that looks.
Greg Hoblet probably had the ultimate role in developing the whole style.
You know, the style of the show initially was very bold.
When I first watched the show and I wasn't on it, I would say to myself, how do they get all this coverage? How do they know where to go? I was totally intimidated as a director.
The camera was never handheld. It was always on what we call a fluid head.
But once I shot it, it was the most freeing, enjoyable directing experience because you basically felt it was all spontaneous all the time.
It was kind of a documentary approach.
There still was a life to it. There still was a style that if Greg originally co-opted it from Leslie Decter, dozens of shows have co-opted it since, refined it through editing as well, and some might say unrefined it, where the storytelling has taken a second seat to style override.
It worked. You know, it worked for what we did.
What Greg did was he created the look of NYPD Blue.
He wanted the audience to feel like they were standing in the corner of the room and witnessing what was happening.
Did you hear her tell that little girl to hate me?
It sprung from some commercials that were pretty popular at the time Leslie Decter had been doing.
Where instead of having just a nice still frame, the camera would move a lot.
And in fact, a lot of these little moves that we used to do on the camera we used to call Decters.
And since the camera was always moving, I think people assumed it was handheld. It would do little hitches back and forth. If you were to look one way, I'd look that way with you. If you turned back the other way, I'd turn the other way with you.
Where someone would come in the door and your eye would go over, find that person and bring them into the scene.
When a scene would get crazy and all hell would break loose, the cameras would be crazy and all hell would break loose. On the more intimate scene, there's very little movement. The camera it's just taking a little kind of nervous twitch and that's it.
You know, Lex actually had a signature little hitch that he would do that was kind of a dit and back.
Uh-huh.
Action!
And I remember wondering what that was all about, and I actually never asked him.
I could take an ass whipping, but it's not going to change what I say about that kidnap.
What Greg Hoblet was brilliant at was coming up with the idea of shooting second unit in New York. You'd send a crew to New York and you would shoot, buses and people walking across the street. Just those kind of weird things you see in New York. And the camera would whip to these different things, and then it would whip from top down to the street level. And then in LA, we would actually shoot these scenes, and the camera would whip from something down to the action. And when you cut these two together, it's seamless.
So the cameras were Panavision. We would use long lenses. And anything that made it look handheld was the operator put in himself.
I know the first couple of episodes, the camera whipped a little bit more and was a little more jerky, but that was all supposed to be the effect of, as a person sitting in a room watching a conversation, your eyes go back and forth and you zoom in on things and zoom back on things. And it's very hard to get an actual camera to do what the eye does.
I remember getting a lot of feedback about people that were watching the show and getting, they would say, oh, it makes me sick.
I can't watch the show because the camera moves too much.
A lot of that movement actually was happening in editing as well, because they would take a little piece and then cut another little piece into it.
Greg, was a big proponent of that movement.
Yeah.
When Greg left, I toned it back a little bit. I probably dialed it back, 50%.
Stephen, in no uncertain terms, said, I want less movement.
Yeah, which we did.
Tone it down.
Just the pure story and the character development could emerge without quite as much distraction.
The process changed as David's process changed, as the writing changed, as the stories became a little more involved.
In toning down the camera movement, we added shots. I think we used more cuts than any other show at the time.
We could shoot from two cameras, maybe one center and one kind of off to the right. And then what we would do was we'd do wides, and then we'd go tighter, and then tighter. And then this camera over here would get the profiles, and this camera would get the 50-50s and the back and forth.
So what you trying to say?
It was a faster way to shoot. We had an enormous amount of work to do in 8 days at the time. The other great thing was we had zoom lenses on the cameras, and a lot of times the actors didn't know they were being photographed.
And now part of the reason we would use those lenses, I mean, because we could change the lens immediately. I could go from, a medium shot of a person to an extreme close-up in less than a second. Stylistically, that would become part of the show sometimes. This guy's looking really tight, and then you'd widen out.
One of the harder jobs in the set was the guy pulling focus for these operators, because they had to be aware of every possible place they needed to find a focal length.
The operators would do a freelance pass, and they would go off and find little pieces.
Fishing,
yeah.
The operators wore headsets, and Brian, in the beginning was working with Mr. Microphone, and I stole that away from him. We would talk to the operators, go down and get this, go down and get that.
Find things to shoot.
Or you'd say, this time I want you to fish.
Which was always fun for the operator, because you got to call the shots at that point.
Those little pieces a lot of times were just gems, in the editorial process, because they could really tell stories.
We would use small eyepieces. You want to be as close to the camera as possible. You'd sit as close to the camera as possible. The thing is to become organic, become with the camera, because we get ourselves into positions where you'd actually have to swing maybe 180 or 270 degrees.
I think we'll kind of do the real basic version of how we would approach shooting a scene. And action. If he walks behind her, Steve, you'll want to drop down on her just like you did. Go down on the paper and up his arm to him. Cross behind her, please, and fall down on her.
No, I don't understand what you're talking about.
And back up to him.
This is the first I've heard of it, so I don't get what you're saying at all.
Just like at home.
Yeah, just basically that's what we would do. You'd talk your way through the scene.
If you wanted to let this pass with the actors become a little more heated, then you'll see how Steve's going to get into the scene and maybe do some little snap zooms, which we did occasionally.
And action.
So why do you have me here?
We're talking about that $100,000.
We used to do almost sometimes whole passes where we'd stay on the props and do tie-ins from pencils or glass or something that had to do with the story.
Bang in, Steve.
Do I have to get my lawyer involved here or something?
Go ahead, Steve.
You're not making the rules.
Back up.
Is that clear?
And?
This?
See how Steve resized to get the over here, too. Get a little wider, Steve. See a little more of him.
Yeah.
More.
What's the problem? Do you have an error in your thinking?
Bang in on her, Steve.
Hundreds of $1,000s, and I don't know what.
And go find him.
This is absolutely ridiculous.
Good move. See how he made it very fluid off of her onto him.
The one thing we would do, for instance, if there was a gun or if there was some piece of evidence that they were talking about, we'd make sure and really tie that in as part of the rhythm of the scene, and then the editors, of course, would take the piece and use it.
A lot of shows have insert shots to see what's on a piece of paper or to look at a piece of evidence more closely. First of all, there wasn't the style of the show to see those things, and I was amazed and sort of freed by the fact that that stuff really wasn't that important.
You get those great spontaneous mistakes. We'd call them the happy mistakes, even that the actors would make. A lot of the operators liked working on the show because they had a lot of creative input, and they were able to kind of bring their own, almost as an actor, bring their own rendition of the scene. It's about telling the story from a photographic standpoint.
Right.
What the audience sees is what the operator felt at the time.
Tell you, Abby, the endorphin release subsequent to these workouts has gotten to be the high point of my days.
So if it feels this good, it's going to be illegal, huh, Greg?
Oh, yeah, I feel subject to arrest.
We built the whole facade of the precinct. That was really the 9th precinct in New York. We used it less and less because they actually changed the facade of the building in New York. Eventually they put, I think, a wheelchair ramp in. And
the original precinct set was designed by Paul Leeds, the original production designer of the show. Basically, the inside of the precinct is a component of a couple of different precincts that they scouted in New York.
None of you's got the balls to stand up for what you did?
The upstairs, downstairs of the precinct, because we're shooting on a soundstage, there has to be a break from when you go from the first floor to the second floor. So the first floor is built with a staircase that goes up to nowhere. And then the second floor a pit was dug, and the staircase goes down into the pit. And both staircases were totally duplicated, so that you could take somebody going up the stairs, and then you can make your cut and roll your camera across the studio into the second floor stairwell and shoot down as these people came from the pit up. And when you cut it together, it looks like it's a continuous flow.
Diane's already upstairs.
The sets were designed really smartly by Paul Eads because a lot of it was modular and you could take walls out really easily.
When you build a set on stage, what you want to be able to do is have wild walls. We call them wild because you want to be able to pull them out and put them back in again.
So we could always move back. You need another 4 feet, and you just move the wall and the camera would go back 4 feet.
You just have all these people and equipment.
We would do long takes where we'd follow people all over the set. You know, it really helped that, to be able to put the camera exactly where you need it.
So it's very important that all the walls wild out. Everything about the whole show, from the casting to the sets to the way it's shot and lit, it was all about character, defining character, who they were, what they were like, what their background was, and then we would then design the sets based on that and the action. The whole purpose was to give the feeling that you are in the room. And so therefore the camera was usually always set up in kind of one area. So it was easy for me as a designer to design the sets for the best vantage point for the camera to be.
Something Andy mentioned stylistically also was to keep the camera low.
It was very freeing for the directors where you could put the camera low or you wouldn't have to worry about fighting to not see off of the top of the set.
A lot of shows today, it's easier to light it from above and they pull the ceilings off. So the camera's always kind of like looking almost straight on. He'd get down and kind of look up at somebody and look up at a scene. You would see the ceiling.
With lights and stuff and, you know, a water stain on the ceiling and fluorescent light fixtures hanging down.
You know, bundles of wires and the shitty peeling plaster.
It just gives you so much more to set.
You could shoot through things.
He would add depth to scenes, long corridors with smaller doorways in between, so there'd be depth.
Having reflective surfaces, glass in the windows or glass in picture frames, but it reflects something across the room. It's natural, adds more depth. One of my tricks I love to do is to try and put a mirror in a set, a wall mirror.
He would put in a lot of windows, a lot of doorways, a lot of practical lights that, you know, that I can motivate my lights from.
It made it very easy from a cameraman standpoint because literally you'd walk on the set and you go, wow, here we are.
You always thought, I'm believing this, so you right away are in it.
Depending on the story, we would dress the backlot of Fox, which isn't very big as far as Hollywood backlots go.
We had basically this little T.
That was what was the fun. You were really trying to create New York in this teeny little set.
We would try and create as much character with the sets on the street and have as much things going on. As Paul Eads used to say, it was just eye wash. As the camera would pan across stuff, you'd have all these textures and all these things going on that it would just feel like you were actually in New York.
And if you think 2, 3, sometimes 4 stories in an episode, and think of how many sets you might have within all those stories, the amount that we reused that backlot, repainted, reconfigured, re-signed, you know, repopulated with different kind of extras or different vehicles, graffiti. We had a truck that we called the graffiti truck that would be used to block stuff.
When we would shoot in New York for the first 5 episodes, I would spend a lot of time taking photographs of buildings, of storefronts, all kinds of visual elements of New York that I could then recreate those looks on our back lot here in Los Angeles at 20th Century Fox Studios or downtown LA.
Paul Eads and Richard Hankins did such a fantastic job. They built little restaurants inside these sets, and that we were able to look out. You know, we had like a bar.
Hi. Get the hell away from me.
And a coffee shop, and then, you know, anytime they needed a tenement apartment exterior, they just kind of rebuilt the exteriors and the set dressing. It was fantastic. You never felt like you weren't in New York.
After we had the first initial meeting of sets and locations, we would then start designing the sets. And I think a lot of the stuff, they were always surprised and kind of look forward to coming down to the set and seeing what we actually came up with.
But when you see the show with the long lenses and the way Paul Eads and Richard Hankins would dress them, I mean, People from New York couldn't tell that it wasn't in New York. They'd say, "What is that? Is that Little Italy? What is that? Is that Prince Street, Mott Street?"
Some kind of Jew said.
I had many people come up to me and say, "I thought you lived in New York." And I said, "No, we shoot that at 20th Century Fox in Century City."
And then locations. We had to make sure that we found places that we could get a good wide shot and get traffic without having to see that we're in L.A.
2 rape murders over in the 17th.
Which is a major process because we would bring in roll downs to put over existing storefronts, scissor gates, which you find in New York everywhere, tons of trash and trash cans. And you want fire escapes and you want alleys. And so we always ended up shooting in a little area downtown LA. But we always had to make it look different and we'd have to mask certain things.
Through the lens's guidance, we could put your eye where we wanted it to be and not have you see what we didn't want you to see.
We were trying to block palm trees, even telephone poles, because there are no telephone poles in New York. We would come in and we would repaint storefronts, we would age them down, we would graffiti-ize things. I mean, it was major, major production. So to get all these elements flowing, I would do sketches of the location with notes on it for the painters, what to be painting, what props we're going to need, where the cars are placed, build new facades. I mean, we brought in everything.
And the feeling of being, surrounded by cars and taxis and color and different signs.
It was a massive undertaking. It was like an army hitting downtown to make LA look like it's not LA but New York.
When you'd go to New York, again, that was easy because now we're in the real environment.
Because here, obviously, if we're shooting downtown Los Angeles for New York or on the back lot, you want to shoot at long lenses and pretty much compress everything and not see off. Well, in New York, the Chrysler Building is right up there, so why not have it in the frame,
But you'd learn from those places about what you want to see. And when we would shoot in New York, sometimes people would come up to us and say, "Where you guys been? I haven't seen you around lately." That's because we only would do 5 days a year in New York and the rest of it is LA.
I think as far as the lighting goes, that's something obviously we took a lot of pride in it. And if we would make the blacks really deep and rich, we wouldn't add a lot of fill light.
We had windows on one side that were supposedly out to New York. But we had this thing we called the fishbowl, which is the atrium in the center.
It was an air shaft.
Like an air shaft.
And this gave the chance to have windows on both sides so you could light the scene with sunlight from either side of the face.
One of the reasons that the actors had so much freedom on those sets was because we basically lit from outside the set, almost always.
And you really felt like the sunlight coming through the windows was lighting these people.
They had these big xenon lamps that were really hot through a really hot light, bright white hot light. And, if you blasted that, down onto a table, let's say in the interrogation room, it looked like real sunlight coming in there, especially if a guy was smoking. You got a great effect with that, texture coming up.
When we shot NYPD Blue, the main thing was we would shoot it with practical lighting. So it was always important that the DP could augment it with extra practicals in the set or with other lighting.
It was a very realistic look and feel. I think that's the trick, is you want it to be invisible to the audience so that they concentrate on the story.
To not make it look like a set, to make it look like a real police station.
When we would light, we would give the actors freedom of almost the entire set. So a lot of times you'd be surprised. Someone would walk over to a window and it was okay. The thing I noticed about New York that's different than we're living in Los Angeles is there's these big canyons where there's buildings. And even in broad daylight, a lot of times there's not very much sunlight, or it's bouncing off of a window and coming back. And therefore, the businesses usually leave their lights on.
On NYPD Blue, no set was ever pre-lit. And in no time was it lit exactly the same. A lot of shows pretty much have an overall palette that they use, and then they just add to it. And not doing that, you really have to trust your grip and an electric crew.
Most of the storylines are always kind of dark, sometimes morbid.
You bastard. You sick bastard.
I'm impressed but not afraid.
You could call it noirish. Someone would be keyed from not the typical key angle, like key from below or, from the back of their chin, their cheek.
Part of the feeling was it was okay to not have an actor in full light all the time. A lot of producers are so crazy about, I got to see two eyes the whole time. We would set lights where someone would come down a hallway and they'd go into really hot, sunlight, and then they'd come into almost complete silhouette for a second. It looked so fantastic because it was real looking.
In fact, we would probably put something that was overexposed somewhere in every scene.
The tone of it was to not filter the camera at all.
I'm not a big expert with ethnic sore points.
But the idea was, don't cut to a close-up and have it look like, Marilyn Monroe all of a sudden. They're real people in a real space. I think that's part of the heart and soul from us, and it helps the performance. I mean, it helps the way the audience perceives the performance.
We said this should look unlike the rest of the show.
We just created a dark space, and to make it look surreal was really the director of photography and the editing team.
We lit it a little differently, used different diffusion.
So the light would just be absorbed, but also you get a little bit of a kick off of it.
We took a 12-foot by 12-foot silk and just really pumped light into it. The interesting thing when you do that is if a person walks in front of it, they sort of bleed into the white background. It's almost like you're on another planet.
Richard Hankins and I discussed the colors. I was a big fan of not using a lot of red because in video it tends to get crazy.
There were fights about red.
Fights about red.
Take that red shirt off that guy.
But we painted the bar red in that scene, and I lit the wall red. And I had a light that they call a ring light that we actually put on the camera to really let the audience know this is a different place. We had the ring light in some instances would get brighter and darker, and the camera was very floaty.
There was a hell nature to it.
Hell nature, yeah. It was really fun to shoot that scene. It was about being on the street, being there, being in the real space.
Not like every other, cop show that's been filtered through some Hollywood guy's eyes.
Because there is a texture. There's a texture of characters and plot. There's a texture of physical faces and sets and locations, of lighting creates texture. I would probably use one word, and that'd be texture for the whole show.